The scientific opinion on climate change is the overall judgment among scientists regarding the extent to which global warming is occurring, its causes, and its probable consequences. This scientific opinion is expressed in synthesis reports by scientific bodies of national or international standing, and by surveys of opinion among climate scientists. Individual scientists, universities, and laboratories contribute to the overall scientific opinion via the peer-reviewed publications, and the areas of collective agreement and relative certainty are summarized in these respected reports and surveys. The scientific consensus is that the Earth's climate system is unequivocally warming, and that it is extremely likely that this warming is predominantly caused by humans. It is likely that this mainly arises from increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, such as from deforestation and the burning of fossil fuels, partially offset by human-caused increases in aerosols. Natural changes had little effect. National and international science academies and scientific societies have assessed current scientific opinion on global warming. These assessments are generally consistent with the conclusions of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC Fourth Assessment Report stated that warming of the climate system is unequivocal, as evidenced by increases in global average air and ocean temperatures, the widespread melting of snow and ice, and rising global average sea level. Most of the global warming since the mid-20th century is very likely due to human activities. Benefits and costs of climate change for society will vary widely by location and scale. Some of the effects in temperate and polar regions will be positive and others elsewhere will be negative. Overall, net effects are more likely to be strongly negative with larger or more rapid warming. The range of published evidence indicates that the net damage costs of climate change are likely to be significant and to increase over time. The resilience of many ecosystems is likely to be exceeded this century by an unprecedented combination of climate change, associated disturbances and other global change drivers. Some scientific bodies have recommended specific policies to governments, and science can play a role in informing an effective response to climate change. Policy decisions, however, may require value judgments and so are not included in the scientific opinion. No scientific body of national or international standing maintains a formal opinion dissenting from any of these main points. The last national or international scientific body to drop dissent was the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, which in 2007 updated its statement to its current non-committal position. Some other organizations, primarily those focusing on geology, also hold non-committal positions. Synthesis reports. Synthesis reports are assessments of scientific literature that compile the results of a range of standalone studies in order to achieve a broad level of understanding, or to describe the state of knowledge of a given subject. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 2014. The IPCC Fifth Assessment Report summary for policymakers stated that warming of the climate system is unequivocal, with changes unprecedented over decades to millennia, including warming of the atmosphere and oceans, loss of snow and ice, and sea level rise. Greenhouse gas emissions, driven largely by economic and population growth, have led to greenhouse gas concentrations that are unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years. These, together with other anthropogenic drivers, are extremely likely to have been the dominant cause of the observed global warming since the mid-20th century. It said that continued emission of greenhouse gases will cause further warming and long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system, increasing the likelihood of severe, pervasive and irreversible impacts for people and ecosystems. Limiting climate change would require substantial and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions which, together with adaptation, can limit climate change risks. Reporting on the publication of the report The Guardian said that in the end it all boils down to risk management. The stronger our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the lower the risk of extreme climate impacts. The higher our emissions, the larger climate changes we'll face, which also means more expensive adaptation, more species extinctions, more food and water insecurities, more income losses, more conflicts, and so forth. The New York Times reported that in Washington, President Obama's science advisor, John P. Holdren, cited increased scientific confidence that the kinds of harm already being experienced from climate change will continue to worsen unless and until comprehensive and vigorous action to reduce emissions is undertaken worldwide. Quote, it went on to say that Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations Secretary-General, had declared his intention to call a meeting of heads of state in 2014 to develop such a treaty. The last such meeting, in Copenhagen in 2009, the NY Times reported, had ended in disarray. In February 2007, the IPCC released a summary of the forthcoming Fourth Assessment Report. According to this summary, the Fourth Assessment Report found that human actions are very likely the cause of global warming, meaning a 90% or greater probability. Global warming in this case was indicated by an increase of 0.75 degrees in average global temperatures over the last 100 years. The New York Times reported that the leading international network of climate scientists has concluded for the first time that global warming is unequivocal, and that human activity is the main driver, very likely causing most of the rise in temperatures since 1950. A retired journalist for the New York Times, William K. Stevens wrote, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said the likelihood was 90% to 99% that emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, spewed from tailpipes and smokestacks, were the dominant cause of the observed warming of the last 50 years. In the panel's parlance, this level of certainty is labeled very likely. Only rarely does scientific odds-making provide a more definite answer than that, at least in this branch of science, and it describes the endpoint, so far, of a progression. Quote, The Associated Press summarized the position on sea level rise. On sea levels, the report projects rises of 7 to 23 inches by the end of the century. An additional 3.9 to 7.8 inches are possible if recent, surprising melting of polar ice sheets continues. U.S. Global Change Research Program, formerly the Climate Change Science Program, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, reported in June 2009 that observations show that warming of the climate is unequivocal. The global warming observed over the past 50 years is due primarily to human-induced emissions of heat-trapping gases. These emissions come mainly from the burning of fossil fuels, with important contributions from the clearing of forests, agricultural practices, and other activities. The report which is about the effects that climate change is having in the United States, also says, climate-related changes have already been observed globally and in the United States. These include increases in air and water temperatures, reduced frost days, increased frequency and intensity of heavy downpours, a rise in sea level, and reduced snow cover, glaciers, permafrost, and sea ice. A longer ice-free period on lakes and rivers, lengthening of the growing season, and increased water vapor in the atmosphere have also been observed. Over the past 30 years, temperatures have risen faster in winter than in any other season, with average winter temperatures in the Midwest and northern Great Plains increasing more than 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of the changes have been faster than previous assessments had suggested. Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. In 2004, the Intergovernmental Arctic Council and the non-governmental International Arctic Science Committee released the synthesis report of the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. Climate conditions in the past provide evidence that rising atmospheric carbon dioxide levels are associated with rising global temperatures. Human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels, and secondarily the clearing of land, have increased the concentration of carbon dioxide, methane, and other heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere. There is international scientific consensus that most of the warming observed over the last 50 years is attributable to human activities. Policy. There is an extensive discussion in the scientific literature on what policies might be effective in responding to climate change. Some scientific bodies have recommended specific policies to governments. The natural and social sciences can play a role in informing an effective response to climate change. However, policy decisions may require value judgments. For example, the U.S. National Research Council has commented, "The question of whether there exists a safe level of concentration of greenhouse gases cannot be answered directly because it would require a value judgment of what constitutes an acceptable risk to human welfare and ecosystems in various parts of the world, as well as a more quantitative assessment of the risks and costs associated with the various impacts of global warming." In general, however, risk increases with increases in both the rate and the magnitude of climate change. This article mostly focuses on the views of natural scientists. However, social scientists, medical experts, engineers and philosophers have also commented on climate change science and policies. Climate change policy is discussed in several articles. Climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, climate engineering, politics of global warming, climate ethics, and economics of global warming.